The Monday Night War is on, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Pro Wrestling Report, and all this week our discussion is all about the battle between WWE and TNA from this past Monday night. Who won? Who did things right? Who did things wrong? All that discussion coming up next on the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime.
Number one since 1998 on television, ESPN Radio, and the World Wide Web. This is the Pro Wrestling Report with your hosts, the man they call Meathead, Frank Cosentino, and Dameon Nelson. Professional wrestling news, opinion, and information from fans for fans.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report Prime Time. Dameon Nelson sitting alongside the man they call Meathead. Both the Cos and David Hero out traveling the world right now. However, they're not important because what we need to talk about is what the world's been waiting for. Our discussion on this past Monday's Monday Night War, the battle, if you will.
Can I ask you, the wars thing, it's bothered me a little bit. I've been calling it a matchup. Just me personally, the Monday night matchup.
Well, in a war you have battles.
Only because a war you have, as you just said, more than one battle. It's just a matchup. It's just the first ever one-on-one.
Correct, but TNA has been referring to it as the Monday Night War, so we will do it as the same. So are the fans out there, and it's the most recognizable of phrases.
It's because it's lazy.
What should we call it then?
I think Monday Night War is only because that's what everybody else is doing, and we're trying to. But
Can I have the last 37 seconds?
I'm just saying, in my opinion, that it should be a Monday night matchup because we've only done it once.
The Monday Night War between WWE Raw and TNA Impact from this past Monday. I was in the Impact Zone in Orlando, Florida, and since that I have watched the television product from both brands. And I guess basically, let's review the shows and let's first talk about the group that started the battle, that being TNA Impact. Overall, and you can hear much more detailed discussion on our 540 ESPN radio show, available now on iTunes and on YouTube and PWRshow.com. We certainly can't fit all the discussion we had then into this 30-minute television program. But be that as it may, Meathead, TNA Impact, I was there live. It was a very special show which satisfied a lot of people but didn't necessarily satisfy some others. What were your thoughts of the 3 hours of Impact sitting home watching on Spike TV?
Let me give you a small synopsis.
Of
what happened. I was geeking. I was giddy. Geeking.
Is that
I was happy.
A term for something?
No, it's not a term for anything. I was happy to finally have something relevant happening in wrestling. Not only on one channel, but on two channels. Mm-hmm. I finally got to use my picture-in-picture. I've had that damn service for free forever. And I've never had a reason to use it.
No, let's backtrack just a hair. What show were you watching predominantly live?
At what time?
During the head-to-head hours of 8 to 10.
Depends on the matchup.
Predominantly, meaning which of the two shows
it's
did
50,
you watch
50.
more of? It can't be 50-50.
It absolutely
cannot be 50-50.
It absolutely can.
There is more content than commercials, so if you were flipping
No, because again, and we have more analysis on this, there were many situations where both were on commercial at the same time. I watched them live, remember.
Okay. So a couple weeks ago, you don't watch anything live. Now tonight, you're refusing to answer the question of which show.
No, I mean I am answering the question, and I'm not doing it for argument's sake. We've had this conversation.
I don't think there has to be a show that was watched more. Just simply logistically.
Just for an answer, so we can move on. Would you like that?
That's why I asked the question.
2010. That's what I'm going to do. I watched Impact more. There you go.
So difficult?
No, because it's not the right answer. It's not my answer. It's the answer.
So which show, what was good, what was bad about Impact?
That X Division Steel Asylum was awkward.
How so?
It didn't have the feel of a normal show. I thought that Homicide was on the top way too long, and now we found out.
72 seconds.
Now we found out that he was stuck. But again, watching it live, it felt awkward. I'm not sure I was the only one. I'm absolutely sure there was more that noticed Jeff Hardy's music the second it hit and heard it and said, I know whose music that is. Because it's actually Jeff Hardy and his band. That's his music.
And Jeff Hardy, one of the many surprises that night, I believe it was a total of 9 talents who we had not seen on TNA either recently or ever debuting that night. Jeff Hardy, the one nobody really thought would be the one, even though he did say the day before that he was going to be at TNA Impact, however, supporting another person who debuted, Shannon Moore. So let's go over those names and talk about who did make their Impact debut this past Monday night. And remember, you had the opportunity to watch it as well last night on Spike TV. And once we get the ratings information for that, that's going to really tell a story, because if they did what I think they did, which is build intrigue for those WWE Raw viewers who didn't either know or watch any of Impact, they may have a reason to have tuned in on Thursday to see what the buzz out there is all about. But be that as it may, the people who debuted for TNA this past Monday: Jeff Hardy, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, Val Venus, Sean Morley, Ric Flair, somewhat expected but still surprising, unfortunately expected, the Nasty Boys, Eric Bischoff, Uncle Eric, Orlando Jordan, who really,
Yikes.
and obviously Hulk Hogan. Shannon Moore, as we mentioned a minute ago as well. So a lot of people, I mean, they really put a lot into that show, and the reviews have been, I would say, mostly favorable, but there are a lot of angry people out there.
But in the world, there's always going to be a lot of angry people. That's
Correct.
just how
They're
it is.
angry specifically because those who are praising TNA for putting out a good product and getting a good result are pretty much picking that apart and finding everything to say that they did wrong. So the question, what did TNA, if anything, do wrong on this past Monday?
We were just talking about it, and I just alluded to the fact that the Steel Asylum was just awkward. Orlando Jordan, not entertaining at all. Not entertaining at all. And to be honest,
the segment was incredibly entertaining.
The segment was entertaining.
And he played a part of that.
Only because he was the foil to the Pope.
Right.
Pimp slapping.
He had a roll.
Oh, the Pope verbally pimp slapped him. I mean, he owned him up and down, left and right. The Pope just... Now, was Orlando Jordan meant to be, his foil? I don't know. But it just... He looked awkward, too. Val Venus and the strip poker.
It's the third highest rated segment, by the way. People like,
It wasn't Val Venus, it was the girls.
Mm-hmm.
They thought Angelina Love would show up, just
And,
as I did.
Not quite yet.
Okay, but that's what I believe. I mean, obviously we did sit there and pick it apart. I mean, that's what we do. I still have both of them saved on my DVR. I'm going to watch them again at some point when I have the time. But Impact was overall, and you noticed the updates, I mean, obviously from Dameon, from Dave Hero, from myself. I said that TNA killed WWE product-wise.
I would say that some of their big successes obviously would be those returns. Ric Flair and Hardy, I think, being on the top of that list because those were two that may have been speculated on but not expected. Now, keep in mind, everyone else out there also speculated that Ken Anderson would be a part of that show, and we were lucky enough to know all along that that was not going to be the case. But it's again, there was so much speculation out there as to what would happen. Nobody really knew, and I think that from the first hour all the way through the end of the show, TNA did exactly what they needed to do, which was give some familiarity to the fans who wanted to see a little bit of nostalgia, create some storylines that are intriguing enough to capture new viewers and even their existing viewers, and also show what they're good at. And they did that in the match between Kurt Angle and AJ Styles.
Wow.
And the tag team knockouts match. The singles match where ODB took the title back, that had a reason too, by the way, because anybody who was a WWE fan watching that first hour saw a knockout beat a diva for the championship. That was very strategic. So I think they did a lot of things very, very well. However, I think they could have done better with the Flair return or the Flair debut. He never really said anything. They never really, and that would have worked if they would have sold more about his interaction with AJ Styles. When he walked into AJ's locker room, you really didn't even know it because at first they didn't get a good shot of it. Second, they didn't really mention it. But again, there was that shock that Flair was there. I'll give credit, too, to the fact that when Flair showed up, it was a bit of a swerve because you saw this limo, you knew Hogan was on his way. Well, there was that same limo, but wait, look.
It was a black limo.
It was white when he got out.
Ah!
The stranger who shared Hogan's limo was in a black limo. But a lot of people are saying, and I even wondered this too, was there enough wrestling? And keep in mind what I said a minute ago, I feel they did everything they needed to do. And yes, there was enough wrestling because look at the talents they showcased in those wrestling matches. All the people who they've got big designs on. Matt Morgan, Hernandez, AJ Styles, ODB, Awesome Kong, Hamada, the Pope, Nigel McGuinness.
And AJ Styles and Kurt Angle to finish it off. And
You
put on
really
the
need
clinic.
to.
I have one more piece I do want to throw in there. By the way, Ricky Rackman is not back in wrestling, folks. That's actually Bubba the Love Sponge. You got to go. Exit stage right.
That's the first real error on this show. Bubba, who obviously is Hogan's friend, he's got a following, and you know, you got this guy who...
Unbeknownst to everybody else that knows of Bubba the Love Sponge, got his start here in Milwaukee, and he was a tub of goo when he was here. I mean, Bubba had to be about 450.
I appreciate his product, and I've listened to it.
I'm glad that Bubba has, gotten a little bit, trimmer. He's kind of worked out. He's, he's grown his product. He wasn't what he is now back when he was here. But honestly, not a fan of Bubba.
Bubba's
never
fake.
been a.
Bubba's phony. You look at him, and
he reminds me of a fake man cow.
I listen to Howard Stern quite a bit, and Stern, I believe, is real. Stern, he does things for entertainment value.
Sure.
But I think what he says and what he does, he means and he believes. Bubba's just trying to be cool, and it's not good. That was a big failure. I don't think that's the direction they should have gone in. I don't think they should have had him back at the taping on Tuesday after the lashing he gave them on his show Tuesday morning because of a disagreement he had with the way some of his fans were handled, which was a huge communication issue. But yes, that was the third thing I think they did very, very, very wrong on that show. But overall, I would say TNA Impact had a great flow to it. It kept intrigue from the minute it went on the air to the minute it went off the air, and it was a distinctly different product than what we have seen in the past from them. We'll talk about the ratings results in a minute. I'm sure many of you have heard, but there's some details in there that really need to be analyzed. So that's Impact. What about WWE Raw? What was strong about Raw, and what wasn't so strong, Meathead?
Well, the week of WWE's Raw was the fact that, with the exception of the Bret Hart interaction with Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, and Chris Jericho, it was business as usual. Okay. DX being goofs again with Hornswoggle.
I like Santino, though.
Santino's funny. Santino, he
I
hasn't been on TV.
Whatever it is I'm doing right now.
He hasn't been on TV in about a minute. That's fine. Santino needed a break. What WWE did right on Raw, they opened with Bret Hart.
Mm-hmm.
They teased more interaction with Bret Hart. They finished with Bret Hart.
Yeah. And I will say, the one thing that was very surprising to me about Raw is that opening segment with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. I got the impression that not many of the fans cared as much as I thought they would. Meaning, either they were detached from the original situation, or it just had no relevance anymore. And I can't believe the latter. I have to believe that maybe they just weren't familiar enough with what happened
detached.
12 years ago. And it sort of fell flat. The opening did. Now, the McMahon-Brett thing had a lot more to it than... Now, granted, Shawn and Vince screwed Brett. And Brett screwed Brett, too. Everybody was at fault in that situation. But there's so much more in Vince's interaction with Brett, not just because he kicked him, but there's so much more intrigue and
there's
real story there.
And attachment to that because, again, Brett just was inducted into the Hall of Fame no more than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So Brett is still fresh in some of the wrestling fans' minds. So they've already had the history lesson. They've already played the video package that they keep playing over and over.
Twice.
Night
we saw it.
No, they played it when Brett was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's the same package. There's nothing different on there.
No, it's a different one, actually.
Tweaked, but whatever. The same historic clips.
Yeah. My
point being that wrestling fans do know who Bret Hart is, but as far as the real heat between Bret and Shawn,
I think, and I speculated a couple of weeks ago that this could be too long ago and could be too unfresh. The fans may not care anymore, and I think we saw a little bit of that. Now, granted, I thought both segments were good. I thought they were very good, especially Vince and Bret at the end of the show. But as you said, Meathead, everything in between was absolutely unoriginal, absolutely the same old stuff, and it was boring. And I don't know if I've said that about a Raw before. Usually it incites some kind of reaction, but it was just boring. And I think Randy Orton and Kofi Kingston had a very good match that was given some time.
Again?
I think they completely crapped on Sheamus. How is Evan Bourne supposed to be any type of competitor who can go any amount of time against him if this guy is supposed to be a monster heel champion? That made no sense to me. So I think that their misses were not necessarily misses. It was status quo. And comparatively speaking, I really don't think... They didn't react with Bret Hart to TNA, by the way. This has been in the works for months. It just so happened that, and they may have tweaked it by a week or two, it just so happened that it all fell on the same time. They did not do that. I don't think WWE made a conscious effort to combat what they thought was not a threat, and that being TNA. And quite frankly, they didn't lose any of their audience compared to previous weeks. However, the question that will never be answered is how many more people would have watched if 2.5 million people didn't tune in to Impact at the same time Raw was on. And that's the big story, and that's the question.
That question actually can be flipped around. If WWE didn't have Bret Hart, how many more people would have tuned into Impact?
I think that number is minimal, only because Impact was not on its normal day. If it was a normal thing where this war had been going on and people were in the habit of potentially watching both shows, I think it would have impacted more. I think Impact being on impacted Raw more because they can't. They're not going to debut 10 people every week. It's just not going to happen. No. But
they hot shot it, and I mean, most of the hot shots worked.
WWE gets a 3.6 rating, the same rating it got the previous week, off of hours of a 3.5 or 3.7.
That was a bump. We talked about that, and we had said that the rating from the week before was a bump, maybe anticipating Bret Hart. We knew Bret Hart was coming along. Last week's rating, not this previous Monday with Bret Hart, but the one before that, actually was a bump from previous weeks.
Yeah, but they simply gained nothing. However, TNA got a 1.5 rating. Now, that may not sound very strong, especially when you compare it to Raw's 3.6. And quite frankly, it's not strong when you just look at the Raw numbers and Raw data. TNA was able to score a 1.7. Was able to score 1.7 in the unopposed hour with nearly 3 million viewers and peaking at about 3 million viewers when Hogan was in the ring to give his speech. But yes, TNA did get half of the WWE rating, but here's what needs to be analyzed. TNA has struggled to get above a 1 rating on Impact on a regular basis on a regular night of Thursday night. On a night where many said they didn't get the word out enough, a night where many said they had no chance, a night where many thought WWE would annihilate them, they got their highest rating in the history of the company.
1, they didn't annihilate them. 2, they got their highest rating in the history of the company. 3, this has legs. Mm-hmm. This really has legs. Now, granted, it could have been more. We're not going to sit here and just basically, pat TNA on the back over and over and over. Great job. Now, what have you done for me lately? It's like a football team that makes the playoffs but knows that they want to win the championship. Don't get too excited. All you've done is gotten yourself in the tournament. All you've gotten yourself at is the dance. Now it's time to dance.
And we'll talk about later in this episode what are the next steps for both companies. And I think the obvious one for TNA maybe shouldn't be the step they go in. But be that as it may, let's talk about the hourly ratings. And as I said, TNA getting a 1.7 in that first hour. And there's been a lot of people who have poo-pooed on TNA for their decline in ratings over the course of the 3 hours. They went from a 1.7 in the first hour to a 1.4 in the second hour and a 1.2 in the final hour, while Raw gained a good number of viewers from its first hour into its second hour as well. Now, when you look at that first unopposed hour specifically, throughout the course of the quarter hours, all 4 of them within that hour, TNA gained viewers. Mm-hmm. They continued to gain viewers, peaking at, like I said, about 3 million total viewers, which is astronomical for them, astronomical for Spike TV as well. Mm-hmm. Peaked at about 3 million viewers when Hogan was in the ring, and then as that angle progressed, people started switching over. I mean, really, you had a choice, and you had Hogan versus Bret Hart. And the two things that we can't...
Well, it was Hogan Bischoff versus Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. I mean,
correct.
That's the 4 talents that you had going head-to-head.
The 2 things we can't compare right now or talk about right now are the DVR numbers, which takes a couple of weeks to come out, and also the ratings for last night's Impact. Because I think that's really going to tell a tremendous story, because it's not... Maybe people will tune in to see it again. I certainly won't. Only because I've watched it.
I have a DVR, and like I said, I may watch it again.
So these could be new viewers or the regular viewers who may not have tuned in Monday night. Now, if they do an abysmal, anything can happen in this business. They do some kind of abysmal rating on Thursday. You can either attribute it to the replay or attribute it to the fact that there was no intrigue built. I'm betting
also spoilers. I mean, not spoilers, but results available. I mean,
yeah, but if you read that show and see what happened and see all these people that debuted, that
you should jump their rating. To watch the show.
Yeah, should build their rating. Is there a story in the fact that aside from Hogan being on and the main event with AJ Styles and Kurt Angle, where ratings actually went up for the quarter hour
there is a story. Again, it's TNA and it's live, and there was rumors that anybody could show up.
Mhm.
So there was
And
intrigue.
quite frankly, anybody did.
There was intrigue all throughout the entire show. I wonder who's next.
Mm-hmm. You know, it seemed during Impact that there was no limit to the possibilities of who would show up that night. It really did. And I think they over-delivered. They really, going into it, it was going to be Hogan and Bischoff we knew, and Scott Hall we knew because he was at a function on Sunday for the company. Some of them were obvious, others were a bit surprising, but again, TNA and Spike TV very happy, as they should be, their highest rating ever, going up against Raw, who, again, I don't think they did anything to combat. And quite frankly, what could they have done? I don't know. They announced the matches going into it. They announced DX versus Jericho. They announced Kofi versus Orton. Everybody knew Bret Hart.
Matches we had, and we knew Bret Hart was coming back.
And nobody knew a single match that would be on Impact. And some were saying, this is their... You know, it's fun. And what I like to do is look back at what we said and what everyone else was saying out there going into something, and then not necessarily look at what's being said after, but looking at what was being said before. And everyone was looking for a reason to explain TNA's failure if it were to happen on Monday night. And some people still view this as a failure. And I can understand that argument in some circles, but if you're TNA and you're Spike TV, it's a tremendous success. And looking at that, everyone's like, oh, they're not advertising the matches, they're not getting enough word out that it's going to be live
There was
on
a lot of complaints
Monday.
about Hogan during his tour after he announced that he was in TNA, that he didn't mention Impact. All he mentioned was his book. He did all these different media outlets, and he did all these different talk show circuits, and didn't mention enough of TNA. We're going to be live. We're going to be live.
But you know what? It's a whole different world nowadays, and compared to 1995, compared to 2001 even, when the wrestling wars went away. Right now, you hear an interview like that, or you hear a name, and you hear something you don't know, what are people going to go do?
Look it up on the internet.
Exactly, and that's going to give them all the information they need right there. So Hogan played that game extremely well. I think it was somewhat planned, the fact that he sort of was wishy-washy and wavered on issues during interviews. He'd tell one guy, yeah, a six-sided ring is gone. Tell another guy, we're going to look at it and see what we're going to do with it. Tells one guy that
I'm the boss.
They're going to get rid of people. Yeah, he's making all the decisions. And, you know, again, kudos to TNA. They did a very good job in WWE. You know, the question is, where do we go from here? What's next for WWE? Obviously, we're leading towards Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon.
Well, what's immediately next is Iron Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet.
He's going to be the guest host next. I was hoping Vince would do that on Monday.
I was sitting on the edge of my
said
seat
it, but he
waiting
didn't
for
do it.
He's the baddest man on the planet. Vince, you failed. That's not how you say it.
So yeah, Tyson next week, and I don't know how they work Brett back into this thing. I don't know if he's going to go to Vince's house in Connecticut and attack him or not. I am intrigued by that. I'm intrigued how we're going to get there.
And going back to Tyson again, if you haven't seen him on TV recently, he was just on Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago in my new favorite sketch of all time.
Cock in the box?
Ooh-wee! What's up with that? What's
I'm
up
not
with that? Oh, that's Keenan.
Ivory Wayans?
No, Keenan.
I don't watch
the
the
Good
show.
Burger kids
I don't.
from Nick. Anyways, he was on there, and Mike is kind of funny. So if they put Mike in any kind of comedic role, I think Mike can actually deliver.
Beyond Mike Tyson, though.
Shatner's on his way.
Ah, yes. William Shatner, Regis Philbin, two of my most favorite media personalities.
I don't care for Regis.
He's back, you know, this week.
Love
Had his hip
Shatner.
redone.
Love Shatner.
Does he strike your raw nerve? All right, so but what's next, though? What do they got to do? In my opinion,
You
they
talking
were
about-
completely caught off guard by this.
Yeah.
And I think that they do need to be worried, justifiably worried, that TNA popped a 1.5, popped their highest rating at all time. But keep in mind, WWE, difficult to measure, but when you look at the numbers, didn't lose any viewers. Which is also how we win. We being the fans, because for the first time since 2001, the number on Monday night was nearly 8 million people watching wrestling. That has not happened
Since
in almost
2001.
a decade.
Yeah.
That is the story out of all this. Whether WWE or TNA won the battle, and everyone has their different reasons and different answers for that, the fans won because 8 million people, for the first time in a very long time, tuned in to professional wrestling on a Monday night. Monday nights are made for wrestling.
And like I said, let me get back to one of the first things I said on our program tonight. I was geeking.
was a good show. It was a good show, but again,
What do they do? I know I swerved it,
Yeah.
but what do they do? They go on with status quo. Not that I think it's the right idea, but that's
well,
what
what
they're going to do.
can they do? You know,
What
people
can
are
they do?
escalating discussions now about The Rock and Stone Cold coming in and doing guest host spots. Well, that's a 1 week pop.
No, you could put Stone Cold in a couple weeks. You could put Rock in a couple weeks. I mean, you could open up his movie schedule. Rock's the Tooth Fairy right now. I mean,
Yeah.
Rock was just playing with Lois Griffin and Peter Griffin dolls on Family Guy on Sunday. Did you see that?
I've not yet seen that episode.
Well, the episode
I was
is
on
great.
a jet plane.
The episode is great, but The Rock, it's terrible.
I don't know what they've got in their arsenal. And WWE has been known to surprise a lot of people a lot of times with a lot of stuff. And
can throw a little money around a
Oh, absolutely.
la Ted Turner style.
Absolutely, but again, I really don't know what is next for WWE. I think they're going to put a lot of investment into this HBK Taker thing, put a lot of investment into this Vince Brett thing.
You think investment in HBK Taker? We've done that last year.
Yeah, but I think the rematch has some intrigue behind it. I believe people will want to. I certainly will want to see that because it could be okay. Taker might come out and say, "Fine, Sean, you get a rematch, but this is my last match because that day's coming." And maybe if I lose or whatnot, I think there's still some things they can do.
Well,
with
if
that,
he
but-
would say last match, then it would be intriguing. If Undertaker doesn't say it's last match, he doesn't lose.
But what do they do now?
It should have been HBK.
No.
Triple H.
What does WWE do? What could be up their sleeve?
Status quo. I mean, to be honest.
Is that
with you,
enough?
No. Well, for the next
Enough
year.
against TNA with all these people we now know are there.
For the next year, sure. And TNA can have all this talent they want. They right now have a 2-hour program on one night.
Correct. And you're guaranteed to see them all on that 2-hour program.
And
Wow.
two of the guys that are in the talent right now who had more TV time than they ever should have had, Pity City. They do not belong on TV.
Nasty Boys? Well, we did find out at this past Tuesday's TNA Impact tapings of a match that has been made featuring the Nasty Boys at Genesis on pay-per-view. Dave Hero said it. I didn't want to believe it. I wasn't like Mulder and Scully. I didn't want to believe. Yeah, anyways. What's next for TNA? Now, people are saying that the obvious move is for them to go on every Monday night. I completely disagree. And I disagree for this reason. They put on their best show ever, probably, from an entertainment standpoint this past Monday night.
But they had to use all their eggs.
Exactly. They can't rely on that every week. Now, they need to get the word out about where they are and what they're doing and stay on Thursdays, build that audience on Thursdays, and then go to Mondays. And I could be talking a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. It's not years down the road. It's coming sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
The risk they run is to get comfortable, to think this is the genesis, if you will. This is exactly where they need to be, and not know. You got to test the waters, folks. You got to see.
Well, they
if
just
this
put their
sticks.
feet. They just put their feet in the water. It's a temperature check.
But you got to see if it sticks
It's
on
a Frank
Thursdays.
Cosentino trademarked temperature.
You got to see if it sticks on Thursdays. You got to see who's being received and who's not being received.
But
the
I
other
think
part
it's-
too, there's
I
a
think-
lot of TNA people we didn't see.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot closer than you think, and I think because this is a TV business, plain and simple.
Yeah, but
Even
they're
though
not
it's-
going to pull a 1-5 every night. They're not going to pull
But
a 1-5 next week if they go.
The important times to pull the 1-5s, the next one is in February, and the one after that is in May.
Well,
It's the
exactly.
sweep run.
No, but the one thing that's being discussed is doing a live Monday special once a month. And that'd be perfect to do right after the pay-per-views. If you don't know,
Sure.
TNA typically tapes Mondays and Tuesdays anyway. So
Mhm.
do a live show once a month.
Talent's
On
already
Mondays, make it a
in-house.
special gig, make it a big show, culminate with that, gives you something to drive towards, gets you a little bit because you got the post-pay-per-view intrigue and
Mhm.
whatnot. I think that's the way to take it, see how those specials go for a couple months, and then
Well,
potentially
Epics
look
is
at...
on his way as well, but
Yeah,
that's
that'll be
just
following
it's
Impact
just
starting
a
the 11th.
just a clip show.
Yeah, but it also, and here's what's good about a clip show for TNA right now, not on a Monday night unopposed as they
Right.
did before. Here's what's good now. Fans will now have the opportunity to see what their product is.
Go back and
See the good wrestling, see what has happened, see the people that may have been there, and really understand what TNA is all about. And I think that's why the AJ Styles Kurt Angle match happened. A lot of
Correct.
people were knocking that, but really, you put your two best guys who can put on the best wrestling match out there, and I think only Nigel may have
And
been
actually,
close.
old school, new school.
You had Angle, who was recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
You had AJ, who was a champion, who there was a risk throughout this whole thing, folks, that AJ would not walk out that night still the champion. And quite frankly, one other potential miss was the fact that they didn't mention the world champion until the middle of hour 2, I believe. But again, I didn't know at the time that Flair had walked into AJ's locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And I like where they're going with that. You got Flair in AJ's head. AJ's a champion. Flair's a 16-time world champion.
That's a mental rub.
It all makes sense. The intrigue at the end of the show at TNA with Hogan, sort
Hanging
of
out with
torn, what to
Paul
do. And Hogan's promo, by the way, let's not talk about that. He addressed what needed to be addressed. All the speculation, Hogan's going to come in and bring all his friends in. Well, he did. But we didn't see matches or prominent storylines featuring Orlando Jones, featuring the Nasty Boys.
Jordan, by the way.
Orlando Jordan, sorry. Featuring, hell, that's really, when you look at his friends, that's it.
Quote unquote,
Hall's not really his friend.
Hall and Waltman, no, but those are his boys. Hall and Waltman.
Oh, but then, okay, so Steiner's probably his boy too. Steiner was there, not used.
Doesn't matter. Hall and Waltman were the ones that were doing the attacking.
Well, but they had to.
Can I throw this out there too? Did they pull out the guy that's been attacking AJ out into the ring and like a whole black limo thing too, or black Comer thing too? Because
No.
they stopped with that storyline. It just wasn't mentioned anymore.
It will be all explained next Thursday on Impact.
Oh, thank you.
Had they not put
I don't
Hall,
read
Nash,
spoilers.
Waltman, and Hogan in the ring together, dressed in black, they would have gotten attacked for that. How could you not have the NWO? But of course, now they're being attacked for doing it. Again, in some cases, you can't win for losing, but I think they did everything they had to do in that segment. Hogan saying, not going to be that way this time. And granted, it could be all a crock of crap. But getting out there and addressing it to them and their disbelief and what's Bischoff doing. How long has it been since there's been a storyline that we can talk about that has been so intriguing from TNA Wrestling?
It was hot. I mean, Eric Bischoff coming out with a generic version of music. I mean, obviously Hogan's was a generic.
But it was hot. As you said, it was hot. It's like, okay, Bischoff, all right, who's next?
And the two of them looking right in the camera and talking to you and me.
Tearing up the script, the format, which was funny. That was a real format, by the way. I watched it all happen. I was sitting in front of Today at Taz, and I watched it all happen. They didn't necessarily have it ready, blah, blah. But it was very well done. It was good that it was addressed. And they could TNA can write these stories. They could do the same stories with their staff, their performers, their wrestlers, their talents. But what makes this different is you've got Hulk Hogan, you've got Eric Bischoff, you've got Sean Waltman, you've got Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Ric Flair. You've got the major players in the business performing these roles. And we talked on the ESPN radio show this past Wednesday night about the age factor. People are talking about, they're all old. They're all, well, when you look at it comparatively speaking to WWE, yeah, not that big of a difference, by the way. But, I think TNA deserves accolades, and I appreciate the passionate fans out there who are crapping all over TNA. That's great. Keep on doing so. You passionate TNA fans who are crapping all over WWE, that's great. Keep on doing it. Because as long as the discussion continues about professional wrestling, and as long as 8-10 million people are tuning into wrestling on Monday nights, again, we all win as fans because it will elevate and amp the product on both ends. And that is what we got during the initial batch of the wars, when WWE was also caught off guard, by the way. And hopefully that's what we'll get this time if the wars do continue. I think no matter what, TNA's done this very well. No matter what, there's a war right now. They don't have to be head-to-head, but it's still going to be, this is potentially going to be interpreted as different from what I mean, but they're in the same league as WWE right now.
How dare you?
And what I mean by that is...
No, it's okay.
They're a major national wrestling company now.
Yes.
And they were before. They were a national wrestling company before. Now... You got the wires picking up on the ratings story. Obviously, it's not a press release, but when you can attach names like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and no names like that.
We make such a big deal out of it, and it's not that big a deal, but it is. They were a trending topic on Twitter.
Number one.
They were number one. That's nothing to be sneezed at.
Yes, indeed. Well,
That's true.
I'm not sure if we accomplished anything, but the discussion is great to have.
And continuing.
about the battle between TNA and WWE. Remember, again, the point I want to continue to drive home. The winners in this, if TNA succeeds and if WWE maintains its success, are the fans. And just take that for what it's worth. So, we will be back soon with a brand new edition of the Pro Wrestling Report. Until that time, actually Monday night, by the way, Monday. Pro Wrestling Report returns to its normal time slot on 540 ESPN Monday night, right after WWE Raw. We'll see what Tyson did and what they had to do in order to potentially up their level of business over on Raw. That'll be Monday night, 10 o'clock p.m. live at ESPNMilwaukee.com, PWRshow.com, and on 540 ESPN. Until next time, this is Dameon Nelson for the rest of the staff of the Pro Wrestling Report saying thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.